And that's what climate change is about. It is literally, not figuratively, a clear and present danger.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
The ability of CO2 to do the heavy work of creating a climate catastrophe is almost nil at this point.
The price of oil has been artificially elevated to the point of insanity.
That's not how you power a modern industrial system.
The ultimate goal of this renewable energy, plan is to reach the exact same point that we're at now.
You know who's tried that? Germany. 7 straight days of no wind for Germany. Their factories are shutting down.
They really do act like weather didn't happen prior to 1910.
Today is Friday.
That's right, Greta. It is Friday. It is the most important and most fun day of the week because it is the day that the Heartland Institute broadcasts the Climate Realism Show. I'm Jim Lakely, Vice President of the Heartland Institute. There is no other show quite like the Climate Realism Show streaming anywhere. So I hope you will like, share, and subscribe this podcast, and also leave your comments under the video. These all help to convince YouTube's algorithm to smile upon this program and to get the show in front of more people. And a reminder, because big tech and the legacy media do not approve at all of the way that we cover climate and energy on this program, Heartland's YouTube channel has been demonetized. So if you want to support this program, please visit heartland.org/TCRS. That's heartland.org/TCRS, which stands for the Climate Realism Show. And that will help us keep this show happening every single week. Any support you can give is warmly welcome and also greatly appreciated. And we also want to thank our streaming partners. That would be junkscience.com, CFACT, Climate Depot, and What's Up With That. This program is being live streamed on their X accounts right now, and we welcome all of you watching on X. You can also leave comments for us during the show. And let's get rolling. Today we have with us Anthony Watts. He is the Senior Fellow for Environment and Climate Policy at the Heartland Institute and the publisher of the most influential climate website in the world, What's Up With That. We also have H. Sterling Burnett. He is the director of the Arthur B. Robinson Center on Climate and Environmental Policy at the Heartland Institute. And also Linnea Lucan, of course. She's Research Fellow for Energy and Environment Policy at Heartland. And we are very happy to have as a special guest today, Steve Goreham. He's the author of 4 books on climate and energy, including his latest, which is Green Breakdown, the Coming Renewable Energy Failure. Welcome, everybody, to the show today. I think we have a lot to cover. It should be a lot of fun.
Yep, sure will.
Good to be back.
All right. So you can see from the rundown here that we do have a lot of topics to cover, and I'm very glad for all the people that are here in the chat. Again, we'll be doing Q&A at the end of the show, so if you have questions for either Steve or anybody on this program, we will get to that in the last segment of this here program. So without further ado, we are going to start the show as we always do with the crazy climate news of the week. See, Anthony, I told you I was going to get that Greta drop in there one day.
I was so looking forward to Bill Nye.
I miss Bill Nye.
Bill Nye. All right. All right.
We go. I feel better now.
Me too.
You got to be in the right mindset, Anthony. If you're not in the right mindset, I don't know. The segment just won't work right. But I also like to embrace the power of and, so we'll drop both of those. All right. Our first crazy climate news of the week is an item from our friend Chris Martz. Chris Martz on X. He's been a guest on this program, and I'm sure we're going to have him on again very soon. And it is a tweet that he had. I'm showing the video on there for our viewers here on Rumble and on YouTube. But he has a tweet on X where this right here. This is drone footage from a few days ago. This is dated October 15th. Drone footage shows Duke Energy's Lake Placid solar power plant located in Highlands County, Florida. Looks like Hurricane Milton did a pretty good job on it. This was a $100 million project destroyed by a tornado last week. And Chris asked, does this sound like the definition of a sustainable electricity generation source to you? I don't know. you guys are the energy experts. I'm not really. But that doesn't
Well,
look like that doesn't look
I
optimal.
will point out that in the past, we have had electrical infrastructure such as, transformer stations, that sort of thing destroyed by tornadoes. So, tornadoes do go out and destroy the electrical infrastructure, but this one's particularly tragic in the sense of it is the source of the power. As far as I know, we've never had a tornado destroy a coal or nuclear power plant ever.
Never had a nuclear power plant. I don't know if they've done coal, but I'll say this as well. Look, you can see a wide swath of the panels were they no longer exist, or they're in shards. But just because some other panels are standing doesn't mean that they're functioning. It's all interconnected, and a lot of those panels have holes in them now where the shards were tossed into them. So they may look like they're still there and working, but not so. And the tornado is not unique in a sense. No hailstorm has ever destroyed a traditional power plant, but hailstorms have destroyed solar farms in Texas and in other places, just shattering, and leaving waste. Look, they've got to clean this up. Farmers have come to fear what wind and solar is doing to their land when these things shatter, break, are blown around. The little fiberglass or the silicon crystals, if it's fiberglass or whatever from composites from wind turbines that break or catch fire, the silicon and stuff, the chemicals in it from the solar panels. They don't want that getting into the food supply. It's madness, and it puts lie, as if you hadn't put lie to the fact that solar is not reliable. Remember, half the day is dark, so there's no solar power being generated then. Other days is cloudy or rainy, minimal solar power being generated then. It puts lie to the fact that this is reliable. This is an energy source that you can count on to provide 24/7 power.
Yeah. Now even without
Sterling, you are. This is actually the third big solar installation that's been destroyed in the last 18 months.
Yeah.
And the other two were by hail. There was one destroyed in Scottsbluff, Nebraska, June of last year, a 14,000 panel system that was decimated. And then there was one in Texas, I believe in March.
Yep.
Same sort of thing by another hailstorm. So this is getting to be a more and more frequent occurrence. These solar installations, I don't like to call them farms, being destroyed by the weather.
No, they're industrial facilities, and they take up a lot of space, and they don't work that well. And I'll issue one correction, Steve. It's actually the fourth that I'm aware of, because one of them not here was a floating solar farm.
Oh yeah.
Who thought the world's largest floating solar farm? Who thought that was a good idea?
That was in India.
Yeah, in India, in a country that has a monsoon season every year, and it just wiped it out. The waves came in, crushed them all together. So they've got a lot of pollution in the water now. That's a lot harder to pick up than the stuff you see on land.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if solar farms are going to be the replacement tornado magnets for trailer parks. It used to be you could figure a trailer park would go out and be the target for any tornado. I wonder if that's changing now. Do the tornadoes know?
Well, maybe we could just save time and put the trailers in between the solar panels, so you get them all in one fell swoop.
Yeah. That reminds me of a joke. Do you know what the difference between a divorce in Arkansas and a tornado is, or what the similarity is? Somebody's going to lose a trailer.
All right. Well, we'll leave that there, and we can move on to our
No offense to our friends in Arkansas.
Yeah. No.
All right. It was originally from someone else. It's not my joke, but I thought it was appropriate at the moment. So my apologies to everyone in Arkansas.
Well, every state has jokes about the other state that there's their rival. Don't get me started on Pennsylvania and West Virginia, for crying out loud. All right. We're going to add here to the stage our second item for the week, that there is apparently been no detectable warming surge since the 1970s. This comes from our friends at Climate Depot, one of our streaming partners. They highlighted this week a new paper in the journal Nature Communications, Earth and Environment that, as I mentioned, shockingly says there's been no change in the warming rate since the 1970s. Now, Anthony, I'm going to read this abstract for our listeners and those people who may not be able to read it on the screen. And maybe you can put this in perspective for our audience and let us know how significant it is. It goes like this. The global mean surface temperature is widely studied to monitor climate change. A current debate centers around whether there has been a recent post-1970s surge/acceleration in the warming rate. Here we investigate whether an acceleration in the warming rate is detectable from a statistical perspective. We use change point models, which are statistical techniques specifically designed for identifying structural changes in time series. Four global mean surface temperature records over 1850 to 2023 are scrutinized within. Our results show limited evidence for a warming surge. In most surface temperature time series, no change in the warming rate beyond the 1970s is detected, despite the breaking record temperatures observed in 2023. As such, we estimate the minimum changes in the warming trend required for a surge to be detectable. Across all data sets, an increase of at least 55% is needed for a warming surge to be detectable at the present time. Now, Anthony, one study does not scientific consensus, to coin a term, make. But what do you make of this paper that was published in a pretty prestigious peer-reviewed journal?
Well, this is a response to all of the media hoopla that happened last year in July of 23, where, it was the hottest day ever, the hottest year ever, the hottest whatever ever. It was all about that. And of course, the media extrapolating from that started saying things like, well, global warming is accelerating now, and it's just like what they do with sea level rise. They claim that sea level rise is accelerating. You go and you look at the data and you don't find it. It's not there. And so 1 year of abnormally warm temperatures does not make for an acceleration. And I will point out another study came out this week showing conclusively that the warming spike in 2023 and lasting into 2024 is due to a large El Nino. And that has driven that. So it's just not there. The acceleration is not there. And so what they've done here basically is put the brakes on some of the climate alarmism surrounding the supposed acceleration.
Yeah, I mean, interesting. But this is, that's one of the things we talk about on this program. We talk about at the Heartland Institute a lot internally. We talk about, and actually we showcase at our international conferences on climate change, on how there is still so much to learn about what is happening to the planet. And there's even a lot to learn about how data is collected, how accurate that data is, and how it is then compiled into studies. Right, Sterling?
Well, 100%, 100%. You do science by testing confirmation, disconfirmation, not by consensus, not by votes, not by taking a poll. That's politics. And will this study prove correct? Will it prove true? Well, time will tell. But it's one more data point. It's one more bit of evidence on top of the stuff that Anthony and others have done on the urban heat island effect, on top of the work that Roy Spencer and others have done on and John Christie on density. That points to the fact that it's not clear what's going on as far as temperature wise and whether you can detect a climate signal, despite what the IPCC based on consensus, we all agree, says. You got to remember at one time it was generally agreed, the consensus was the Earth was flat. The consensus was wrong. It was generally agreed that the Earth was the center of the universe. Everyone knew that. Ask anyone. It was wrong. In medical science, people, the doctors, the natural doctors, argued that an imbalance of humors in the body was what caused illness. Of course, that was wrong. Consensus means nothing. Discovery, testing, verification, that means everything. So will this study prove true? I don't know. But it's one more thing that's worth investigating. And while there are open investigations, valid reasons for open investigations, you can't say case closed. The science is settled.
Right. Yeah, it looks like the journal Nature was caught, committing science here instead of propaganda, perhaps, for the first time in a while. All right. We'll move on to our next fun item here, and this is from. Pardon me. This is from Politico, and I gotta say, I'm shocked by the tone, considering it's from Politico. To be honest with you, they seem skeptical that you can actually pass a law to control the prices at the pump. So here's the story. Governor Gavin Newsom signed a bill on Monday aimed at reining in soaring gas prices that have come to symbolize California's multifaceted struggle with affordability. Newsom said AB X21, which gives his administration new authority to regulate the dwindling number of oil refineries, will bring the oil majors to heel by requiring them to prevent price spikes caused by maintenance and low supplies. The oil industry has fought the bill in Sacramento, arguing that it could backfire and drive up costs. Wow. The head of the industry's main trade group accused lawmakers of being more concerned with painting big oil as the villain than tamping down gas prices. And Newsom said at his press conference that the proposal was, quote, not about politics. At the same time, he posted an animated video on X showing former President Donald Trump cutting down trees with a chainsaw to make way for oil derricks. If only he did that, that would be pretty awesome. Gavin Newsom accused the industry in the video of increasing gas prices during the election to scare voters into supporting Trump. Now, guess what happened next, guys?
Yeah.
2 days after Newsom signed this bill. Go ahead, guess. Come on.
A refinery closed.
A refinery closed.
Phillips 66.
One of its few refineries. Look, this is
correct.
This is tantamount to California's. Look, California causes these high prices. They have high fuel taxes.
We are looking at the pullback after another record high yesterday. The Dow is now 24.
We've got an automatic playing video in there.
Well, I've got this video going.
Oh, sorry. I'll remove that. We don't need that anymore.
You've got high fuel taxes. You've got
It's still playing. Jim.
Restrictions on energy use. Evidently, though, not on that news broadcast. You have climate restrictions. You have limits on where you can operate oil and gas operations. They ban offshore. So basically, they've done everything they can to raise costs, and then they want to blame the industry. And it's tantamount to what they did with the restaurant workers, right? They pass a bill. We are going to give restaurant workers a living wage. We're going to make it, what, $20, $22 an hour for the guy at the fry chef and the person answering the drive-through. Everyone's going to get paid that. You have to live with it. And what have they had? A raft of restaurant closures. Yep. You can mandate something. It doesn't mean you'll still have the product, and they're going to have less. Well, Phillips is closing. They'll have less availability of refined fuel right there in California, which means they'll have to ship more in. That raises prices. So it's the very opposite. Good intentions don't matter if you really believe it's good intentions, as opposed to political theater. Yeah. What matters is whether policies enacted increase supply, and this directly decreases supply.
Right. And the real kicker is what Phillips 66's spokesperson said regarding, because they're losing 85,000 barrels of gasoline production for California now. So they said that, and I'll quote from their statement, "Once we cease operations, we will work with California to supply fuels, including gasoline imports, and renewable fuels. So cool, great. Now you guys get to transport it all, and you won't let them build new pipelines. So it's just a nightmare all around. Good job, guys.
Yeah, this is Newsom's "let them eat lithium" moment.
That's a good one. Go ahead, Steve.
I'm waiting for the California ratepayer revolt. I've been involved with the groups in Los Angeles. Electricity prices are up 50% in 3 years. And if you're now air conditioned in July or August in a medium-sized home, it costs you $1,000 a month for electricity. And it's going to go much, much higher in the next few years. So we'll just have to see what form that ratepayer revolt takes.
We already see it. The ratepayer revolt is they're moving out of California. I mean, it's losing population faster, I believe, than any other state. So we're already seeing it. They're voting with their feet or their U-Haul trucks, and it will only get worse, right?
Yeah,
it's going to get worse.
But it's not politics, Gavin Newsom assures us.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me of I'm a kid of the Cold War, and it reminds me of, all we have to do to stop nuclear war is to just sign a bill that says nuclear war is illegal. And then I guess it won't happen.
Yeah. Where I used to live in Chico, California, the city council actually passed a resolution that said nuclear weapons are illegal to own within the city limits. I'm serious. It's on the books. And you know what? It's been totally effective so far.
Right.
Well, as far as you know. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to even give the benefit of the doubt that there are good-hearted intentions here when you pass legislation like this. Like, if you really want to reduce the price of gasoline and oil and energy to the people of California, you do the opposite of everything Gavin Newsom and, frankly, the Democrats that have been ruining that once golden state for the last 20 years. It used to be one of the oil capitals of the United States, and now it is increasingly. And in fact, you go to California, you can still see derricks operating, on the hillsides as you drive up the Pacific Coast Highway and places like that. I mean, the oil is coming out of the ground. It's going to come out of the ground one way or another. We can get it ourselves, or it can naturally leach. And apparently, they just want to leave it in the ground and let it leak everywhere.
As in our comment section, Michael Johansson pointed out, time to invest in companies making horse carriages. And this, I wrote a op-ed like 2 years ago, accusing California of being a Old West or a yeehaw conspiracy theory, because all of their policies are increasingly driving people towards horse transportation and trains. They're aiming for the golden days of California's history.
I'm putting all my retirement funds in buggy whips and pulling horses, draft horses.
I'm harvesting smoke detectors to get the radioactive material out of it so I can build my own home nuclear reactor.
All right, cut his mic. We gotta stop this now.
It's gone off the rails. All right. Let's get to our two memes of the week here for a little bit more laughter. One of them here. This was Anthony submitted this one, and I think Sterling, you said it might be a little bit too mean, but what the heck? This is the Climate Realism Show. We'll put it on the air. So it's a two-panel meme of a girl standing there saying, "You'll die of old age. I'll die of climate change." And then we have somebody who looks a little bit like Sterling and Anthony combined. Who says, "My money's on stupidity taking you out long before the climate does." The internet has some great memes. And then second, this is a cartoon we didn't get to show last week, I don't believe. And I thought it was apropos since we had a crazy climate news thing about tornadoes versus solar panels. Tornadoes win every time. This is a panel. They achieved net zero, and you have Greta flying a broom just for Halloween. Wow, we've stumbled upon the remains of an ancient failed religion. And I think it would be interesting. Archaeologists, 500, 1,000, 2,000 years from now might be looking at digging this stuff up and wondering what the hell we were thinking.
What you're looking at there is the day after tomorrow.
Yeah. By the way, this cartoon is from the Saltbush Club down in Australia. Our friend down there, Viv Forbes, runs that outfit, and he's one of the leading climate skeptics in Australia. So he does these cartoons every once in a while. I like the fact that Greta is flying around. That's cool.
That is good. That is good. All right. Right, we can get to now, I think, our main topic for today. So, and that is climate alarmism in schools. Steve Goreham, I know you do a lot of public speaking. Didn't ask you if you've spoken on college campuses or on or in high schools or places like that. I've been invited to actually speak a couple times at high schools up here in the northern Illinois area, but it's not often that somebody with a heterodox view, heterodox meaning, not the mainstream alarmist viewpoint on the climate, gets to speak to impressionable people or to perhaps an attempt to deprogram them. And before I go to you about that, there's an excerpt here that I'm going to read from a story in The Guardian. The headline is that UC San Diego, the University of California at San Diego, has added an innovative prerequisite to, quote, prepare students for the future they will really encounter. And that and that requirement is to take a course in climate change. So it starts here saying that Melanie Callicott, a human biology major at UC San Diego, thinks about the climate crisis all the time. She discusses it with family and friends because of the intensity of hurricanes like Milton and Helene. That's one reason why she is glad that UC San Diego has implemented an innovative graduation requirement for students starting this autumn, a course in climate change. Courses must cover at least 30% climate-related content and address 2 of 4 areas, including scientific foundations, human impacts, mitigation strategies, and project-based learning. 30% of a course, goodness. The quote, the most important thing is that UC San Diego wants to make sure we're preparing students for the future and that they will really encounter, says a woman who is part of the committee creating this new plan at UC San Diego. The requirement is designed to be integrated into existing classwork. 40 one-quarter courses meet this goal, including, quote, the Astronomy of Climate Change, Gender and Climate Justice, Indigenous Approaches to Climate Change, and Environmentalism in the Arts and Media. Many of the classes that fall under the climate change requirement overlap with courses that focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. What a surprise! And I'll finish up with this real quick, a quote from that same university staffer, and we'll throw it to you, Steve. We're acutely aware as a society of how the climate is changing and how scary that can be. And that probably means that we need to implement some changes in how we do things. If they're thinking about the future, they need to be prepared for what the future might bring. That could mean new opportunities in climate-adjacent fields, such as carbon accounting or civil engineering with a climate focus. Steve Goreham, I don't think recent college graduates are getting nearly the education I did in the early 90s, and it's only getting worse.
Yeah, the students are getting a very one-sided point of view, especially in the high schools and colleges. I have a little story about 8 years ago. I did an online kind of a lecture and discussion with I think it was a junior college in the Chicago area, and I basically presented the point of view that climate is dominated by nature, not man-made influences. And then at the end, they had comments from the students, and there were all kinds of crazy comments. One student said, "This is like finding out there's no Santa Claus." He said, "In 12 years of school, I've never heard that climate wasn't made by humans." So they're getting a very one-sided point of view on all this sort of stuff.
Well, it's honestly, you're already seeing stories almost daily about college graduates being unhireable or being fired shortly after being hired because they're not prepared to work. They don't have ambition and they don't have knowledge. Despite Kamala recently saying, after saying they're stupid and they must be, that's why we put them in dormitories now. She says, "Oh, they're the leaders of tomorrow. It's great." Businesses have found out how stupid these people are. Not all of them, but a lot of them, how unprepared they are. That's the school's fault. And I tell you, if I'm looking at graduates from UC San Diego, it's suddenly one more reason for me to say, well, maybe I'll look elsewhere, because I can't have them coming in telling me all about climate stuff that, by the way, has nothing to do with our business. And B, the idea that they can know what the climate effects will be sometime in the future that we'll have to live with. That's pure fantasy projection. I guess the administrators there have a really powerful crystal ball.
Well, students are being forced to toe the line. If you're a college student and one of the scientists, you have two choices. You can follow the theory of man-made warming, or you can become a climate realist or a denier, as they'll call you. And if you choose that alternative path, very tough to get research contracts, very tough to get tenure, all those sorts of things. So there's tremendous pressure on college science students to get in line with the ideology of climatism.
Well, maybe they'll only be hired in academia and as artists, right? Because I can't imagine some other discipline wanting them. I'll say this, I wish it were just limited to UC San Diego. But as Linnea can tell you, it wasn't when I was in school, but when I was in school, they were worried about the next ice age coming. But it's in all of our education, and perhaps most alarming to me, even medical schools are requiring climate orthodoxy. They're not requiring learning the anatomy and how to fiddle around with people's insides with small razor-like instruments and diagnosing diseases. They're taking time away from that to talk about climate change, and you must learn the orthodoxy and maybe question your patient's carbon footprints. It's crazy.
Yeah, there are a couple big scientific standards that are pushing schools. One is called the Next Generation Science Standards, and that is now being used in 26 of the 50 states. And for example, it says here that in middle school, quote, you're to teach that, quote, human activities such as the release of greenhouse gases from burning fossil fuels are major factors in the current rise in Earth's mean surface temperature. And so we have 26 states that have accepted this next generation science standards. 24 are opposing it primarily because of the issues with climate change. We also have another one called from the National Academies of Science called a framework for K-12 science education. And for example, it says here by the end of grade 5, you're supposed to teach that if Earth's global mean temperature continues to rise, the lives of humans and other organisms will be affected in many ways. By the end of grade 8, they're teaching human activities such as the release of greenhouse gases from burning fossil fuels are major factors in the current rise in Earth's mean surface temperature, global warming. And by the end of grade 12 high schools, whoop, I just lost that here. But basically that says that, the magnitudes of human impacts are greater than they have ever been. So too are humans' abilities to model, predict, and manage current and future impacts. Basically, they think here that science and engineering can control Earth's climate. So unfortunately, this comes from some pretty big science organizations backed by the U.S. government, of course.
Anthony, you wanted to jump in here?
Oh, I was just going to say, I just saw just the other day, I think it was Wednesday, that Zillow, the home listing service, they're getting infected by this now. They are offering a climate risk assessment to go with every house they put up on Zillow now. And the realtors are like, are you kidding me? Because who wants to, let's say the climate risk, on this house is low or high or whatever. It doesn't help with the selling process whatsoever, and it confuses the buyers. And so it's nuts. It's totally nuts. And Sterling, you were talking about the medical community, a little while ago about them, requiring climate courses. Well, I mean, some of the crazy that's out there, like this one, where they're talking about climate causes more kidney stones. I mean, it's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. And that people that don't have the ability to think critically swallow this stuff as if it's factual. And so that's why we see, climate stuff showing up in medical schools now. It's crazy. It's dangerous.
If, just for the sake of argument, if climate caused kidney stones, would the treatment for kidney stones be any different? My suspicion is
Probably
not. Are we now, rather than whatever procedures you have for removing or minimizing kidney stones so they pass through, we'll say no, we're not going to do that stuff anymore. What we're really going to deal with is the underlying cause. We're going to stop running our cars. Yeah, in the hope that the reduced CO2 will reduce whatever climate change, and that'll eventually solve your kidney stone problem.
Right.
Yeah.
The cure for kidney stones is communism. Everybody knows that.
Exactly.
Well, what it might
reminds
do
me of
is
the phrase,
convince.
this too shall pass, but it's going to pass like a kidney stone.
Yeah. Oh, well, what it will do is it will get hospitals to ration their anesthesia and stuff. We're already seeing that. There have been tons of articles that have come out in the last couple of years talking about how hospital systems are reevaluating how they use, their various knockout gases, because those tend to be also greenhouse gases. So it's not a very nice future when you consider that we might do the old sawbones.
So when the doctor
style.
When you're about to go under and the doctor says there's going to be a little discomfort, he means a lot more than there used to be, right?
Well, wasn't there a story just this week about how people have to use inhalers, asthmatics and all that stuff that causes greenhouse gases, and that's a danger. So now people who have breathing problems are just going to have to suck it up or not suck it in.
They started destroying those more than a decade ago when they took the original gas that ejected the medicine out and replaced it with an alternative, which it wasn't nearly as effective. Meaning with asthma, you had to suck harder. And as an asthmatic, I can tell you that ain't possible sometimes.
You just summarized all of climate policy. Suck harder.
Suck harder.
Here's another one. Did you hear the study this summer from Canada's Report Card Research Committee?
Yeah.
And they concluded that the climate change is emerging as a new barrier for children and youth to get more active in Canada. And one of the things they were talking about how is it was getting warmer in Canada. And now the average temperature in Toronto is 8.7 degrees Celsius. So you got to kind of wonder, what about Atlanta, 16 degrees Celsius, or 25 degrees Celsius in Miami? Those kids just must be getting no exercise down there in the U.S.
Well,
everything's got to be due to climate change.
I would think it would make the outdoors more amenable to use in Canada. There are whole months of the year where they either aren't allowed outside because of sub-zero temperatures, or they go outside, but they look like the puffy coat kid on South Park, because they just look like this bundled up large, what was it? There was a movie. Oh, The Christmas Story, where the kid has to go outside wearing that big puffy coat. This just, Anthony says it best, the stupidity, it burns.
For sure. Well, Steve Goreham, you're on our show. You've been a friend of the Heartland Institute for quite a long time. I have up here on the screen two of your books, The Mad World of Climatism. The Heartland Institute actually helped distribute that book and get it into a lot of people's hands. It was very popular. And your new one is called Green Breakdown: The Coming Renewable Energy Failure. I think you need to cross out the word "coming" in the title in the next edition. But why don't you talk first? I just want to ask you, because you use this term climatism. What is climatism in your view?
Well, I used that in my first book, Climatism, and it's basically the ideology that humans are causing dangerous global warming. And it's an ideology of fear across the world, and fear makes people do crazy things. Last year, it was estimated the world spent $1.8 trillion on renewables, on wind and solar and biofuels, trying to control the temperature of the planet. That just is not something that's going to be happening. So I would encourage everybody to use the word climatism for that ideology. We actually had Mr. Ramaswamy and Mr. Trump that have used it at various times during the recent campaign. But the climatists are so effective in all the terminology they use. So it's a bit of a counter term that we could use. But The Mad, Mad, Mad World with the 3 polar bears and the Mazda on the cover really is a good book for kids from about 8th grade and up. If you have grandkids or kids, they're getting a very one-sided story in schools, and this would help give them a little more balance if they were to pick up a copy.
Yeah. In fact, yeah, that's one of the reasons why we had you on here. That book is very good as a good primer for people that are not quite up on this, and frankly, most people aren't. They've been indoctrinated their entire lives, whether they're a millennial or they're Gen X or even older than that. I mean, there's been nothing but nonstop propaganda about how human activity is causing a climate crisis to the point that Anthony brought up earlier. The fact that Zillow is factoring in climate changes to assess risk of a home. It's not climate that is putting homes at risk. It's weather. It's always been weather, and there's a huge difference in that. And it's always the same no matter where you are. If you live in Florida, as we know this year, there is a higher risk of a hurricane hitting your house than there is in my house here in Illinois. That's just as natural.
I see a class action lawsuit in Zillow's future where homeowners who have had their home devalued, because of this climate rating, will band together and say, hey, you caused my house marketability to go down by 20% or whatever, or you caused my insurance to go up by 20%. I see this as being a disaster for Zillow, and I don't think it'll be there very long.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And another thing to help, the Harlan Institute actually has been doing a lot to try to help deprogram the young skulls full of mush, as Rush Limbaugh used to say, in our schools. And that's with our Climate at a Glance, both website at climateataglance.com and the books, Climate at a Glance for Teachers and Students. We sent out tens of thousands of copies of those to school districts across America. And we know that they're being used in some schools. And so we're trying to do our part, but you can always go to Climate at a Glance. And that's a good place to deprogram your kid when they come home from school. Or if you're homeschooling, it's actually a fantastic way to get into some of these topics to understand what's really going on. That's a project of love by Anthony Watts and Sterling Burnett and Linnea. They've been working very hard on that on this series for a long time. So definitely
I should say, to toot our horn a little bit more, we were ahead of the curve on this. We started this long before Climate at a Glance with Why Scientists Disagree, that we sent out to 200,000 science teachers across the nation.
Yep, we did. That's what we're in the business of doing. That's what this show is all about, and that's what Steve Goreham is in the business of as well. I want to remind our people in the chat and in the audience that this is a great time to get your questions in. If you have any questions about any climate topic that has been on your mind lately, our panel will do our best to address it. But before we get to that, I want to ask Steve Goreham, again, I know that you've been on the Environment Climate News podcast with host Sterling Burnett in the past, talking about your new book, Green Breakdown and the Coming Renewable Energy Failure. And I encourage everyone to go get that. It's very easy to find on Amazon and wherever good books are sold. But Steve, actually, I'd like your perspective on, I was kind of joking, but now I'm serious about it. You call it the Coming Renewable Energy Failure. It seems that renewable energy is failing already. What is your assessment? Have you reassessed how fast you think that collapse is coming just based on current events?
Well, there's been a lot of signs. I was predicting a couple decades for this to happen. The world is on, at least a wealthy part of the world, US, Europe, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, is on a quest to get to net zero emissions by 2050. They want to get rid of coal, oil, and natural gas, replace them with wind, solar, and biofuels. But this is beyond a reach out goal. This is an impossibility. It's not going to occur. So Green Breakdown looks at all the aspects of the energy transition, power plants, home appliances, electric vehicles, heavy transportation, heavy industry, the recent energy crisis in Europe, and a number of other things. There's one chapter on climate. Of course, climate underlies all of these efforts. And it points out all the problems with these, all the costs, all the problems with people losing choice and what they purchase, the problems with blackouts and power supplies and a lot of other things, and just points out how this isn't going to occur. But we're seeing many, many examples right now, from failing offshore wind turbines in the US to the EV pullback. Just the other day, State Farm said they're going to remove all of their EV charging in their parking lots, in their multi-story parking lots, State Farm Insurance and any other companies because they start fires. So there are just many, many issues with this effort to try and push for net zero, and it is starting to crumble, and it's going to accelerate.
Excellent. I do. We will keep an eye on that, and we will. I'm sure we'll have you back on again. Maybe every 6 months, just to get an assessment of how bad it's going and things are going into the toilet on that.
It'd be great to join you again.
Yes. All right. So it is that time. It's the favorite time of many people on this show or that watch the show, and that's Q&A time with Linnea Lukin. So, oops, wrong slide. Here we go. Linnea, go ahead. Take it away.
Hello. Thank you very much. So we've got a bunch of good questions here today. Glad we were able to get to them at a reasonable time. Sometimes we go a little long. You guys are having mercy on me today. All right. So first is regarding our California high gas prices story. And that is from It Is I Too, who asks, does California have an exit tax?
No, but they discussed it,
know that?
believe it or not.
Yeah, they're working on it. I think I heard that Wisconsin had one a couple decades ago.
They have discussed it. They're talking about taxing millionaires and corporations that leave, but I don't think that flies in the United States. You have freedom of movement in the United States. That's constitutionally guaranteed. And I cannot believe any court would uphold an exit tax.
No, but to keep
we also have no tariffs between states for trade of goods. So it's kind of tough if somebody leaves the state to say, well, now we're going to tax you or charge you.
Yeah, well, Sterling, I bet a lot of Texans would like an entry tax from people from California license plates. But
I used to think that, but my suspicion, look, if the election goes very differently than I expect it to go, then maybe I'll blame that. But in my experience, the Californians I'm aware of that have moved here are the ones that really California needed more than anything. They were smart enough to get out because they said, we know what the problems are. We know who causes it. Let's go someplace where they embrace freedom. You got corporations moving here. They're tired of regulations, and they're not going out there and now stumping. Oh, if only we had the same regulations California we fled from, here in Texas. So I'm sure there's a mix of both, but many of the ones that come from California are the ones that were wise enough to realize that government in California is the problem with California.
I think if there were to be an entry tax for Texas, rather than a tax, maybe what they should do is require people to take a course on properly making barbecue, properly making Texas chili, and how to shoot a gun.
Well, no, what you should have is a competency hearing to come to Texas. And the competency you'd have to know the Constitution, understand the limits it places on government, and what you are allowed or not allowed, the freedoms that you have that government may not take away. And if you check the wrong boxes or no, this gun thing, we got to get rid of that. Well, you don't get to come in.
Yeah. All right. Here's a question from Squidward. Straight from Bikini Bottom. He says, question for Sterling and Anthony. Would another ClimateGate scandal end this madness?
I think not, and I'll tell you why. When ClimateGate happened, and it broke on my website, What's Up With That? I thought, sure, that was just going to put an end to all this because the exposure was out there. But, they talk about the deep state in Washington. Well, we've got the deep climate in science. And so what happened is the deep climate people banded together to figure out ways to mitigate this, and the way they did it was basically to brush it off, saying, oh, well, he didn't really mean that. When Michael Mann hide the decline thing came out, oh, well, that really wasn't it. They just do all of this. Then they let the fact checkers loose, right? The fake fact checkers. And so what they did was they basically took what had happened in reality, twisted it, and turned it into that never happened. It's not really an issue. We're all fine. We're golden. They did fake investigations of the people involved, like Michael Mann at Penn State and also Phil Jones over at CRU. And these were whitewashes. They were absolute whitewashes. They did not ask the difficult questions. All the simple, easy questions were asked, not the hard ones. And so basically all these people got off scot-free, particularly Michael Mann, who just recently got a promotion this past week. He's like the climate czar of Pennsylvania University or
Provost.
something like
Yeah,
that. I
he's
don't
a
know.
provost. I agree with Anthony 100%. ClimateGate was the Wizard of Oz moment where the wizard says, ignore the man behind the curtain. The curtain's pulled back. He says, ignore the man behind the curtain. But in the Wizard of Oz, they didn't ignore him. In ClimateGate, they ignore the wrongdoing. And as he said, it's just embedded. Look, they are wedded to the research dollars. I have asked climate scientists before. I said, look, is the science settled? Yes. I say, okay, then you don't need funding for further research in climate change because it's settled. And he says, no. Let's, there are still things we need to know about the tinkering around the edges and stuff. Okay, so we don't need to study greenhouse gases anymore because that's settled. Oh, no. It never goes away. It will only go away when people say no more. We're not funding this anymore. And they move their attention to some other crisis, which starts getting the funding. And suddenly the researchers will find, oh, no, this is the real crisis. Let's start researching here.
Yeah, it's just like the particle physics people, they want the bigger and faster, super colliders, because if we get this new super collider, we will find the God particle, and we'll get it figured out, and they keep asking for these bigger and bigger things, just like the climate people are asking for bigger and bigger computers to do more climate modeling. It never ends.
Yeah, just one more lane, then we'll fix traffic. Just one more super collider.
Oh, except they don't. Except they don't do one more lane. What they do is just one more light rail and we'll fix traffic.
Yeah, exactly. One more high-speed rail.
Yeah, one more bike lane and we'll solve it all.
Okay. Here's a asker from X, and I think this is the first time this individual has submitted a question. So thank you, Stargrazer, who says, living in the UK, we now have Labour Party's mad Ed Miliband, who is doing his best to destroy our stable national grid. How do we get through to politicians hell-bent on the crazy net zero agenda?
Kidnap them, take them out into the country, make them live in a grass hut for a month.
Steve, you've just talked about net zero. This seems to be up your alley. How do you convince them?
Well, I think net zero is going to become a hated term in the United Kingdom. They're already stepping, the UK, Germany, and Netherlands are already stepping back from their mandates to force everybody to go to heat pumps because the people just don't like them. And what they're doing now is every 6 months they raise electricity rates in the UK. The electricity prices are controlled, but then they adjust them. And so they're getting about a 10% increase every 6 months. And it's really bad for people. There's about 15 or 20% of the population that has to deal with whether they're going to heat their homes this year or not. Just really a bad situation. It's going to get worse and worse as long as they keep pushing these climate policies and try and shut down other things they've been doing. The latest thing, a bit of news that came out this week, they want to burn wood chips for everything, like the Drax power plant. They want to use more and more wood chips with a mistaken idea that reduces carbon dioxide emissions. Very, very foolish. So they're still off in the Netherlands, but off in the netherworld, but the economics are eventually going to force them back to something that's sensible.
Wait, wood chips are renewable. They're green, right?
If you burn wood chips, you emit more carbon dioxide than coal for the same amount of energy. So that they're not renewable. It's another kind of misguided tenet of climatism that you can burn wood and reduce CO2 emissions.
Well, it's even more absurd when you look at where they're coming from, which is the Southeast United States for the most part, when it comes to the stuff they're burning over in the UK.
Yeah, the Drax power plant over there has been getting wood chips from, Georgia for years.
Yep. US and Canada. Yep.
All right, so here's a sticking to the European theme for a second here. Here's Albert, who said, did you all, that's a funny way to spell that, but I'm guessing that's what you mean, see the electric ferry in Denmark that didn't cut it, and the 40-year-old ferry was brought back in from retirement? I did not. Anyone else?
I saw a story about it a couple of weeks ago, and they made, I don't know how much they spent on this new electric ferry. It was like $5 million, $7 million, something like that, and net zero and all that. And the thing just couldn't cut it. It couldn't. It was the little boat that couldn't, basically.
Yeah, I think I saw a story here in the United States that even there are some police departments with Teslas, and that those are proven to be not practical for the job either.
Yeah, the best electric vehicle out there, the Tesla, is not suitable for the job. Look, you can have these ferry stories. It's not just ferries; it's buses. Just this week,
fairy tales.
Just this week, the Biden administration recalled all the school buses that they subsidized, that they encouraged schools to adopt because of fire risk. Well, you're in the middle of the school year here, folks. What are you going to do? Oh, my suspicion is if they still have their diesel buses, they'll restart them, except that according to most of the federal policies, when you get your electric bus, you have to scrap the diesel bus. It can't be resold even. You have to destroy it because we don't want that polluting on the road. So federal policy keeps putting people in binds, endangering their lives, making them unable to travel, and in the case of schools, unable to get an education.
Electric school buses are a disaster waiting to happen. We just hope that doesn't happen. But
well, like I said, they withdrew them. They have recalled them, at least from one company. But the problem is, you'd think they'd have vetted these things before they encourage school districts to adopt them. It's like telling school districts in the 60s what all their parents, you should be driving the Corvair. Before Nader's book comes out and says it's unsafe at any speed. Now, we know it was no more unsafe than other vehicles, but the point is, they are in such a mania, a furor to push climatism, as you say, Steve, that they will endanger people, and then it's well, okay, let's cause the damage first, and then we'll say, oh yeah, that was a mistake. Let's pull that back. But leave you with no other option.
Yeah. They have so many laws regulating school buses about, safety and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they completely missed the fire problem. Oh, well, that's just not they just blew past it. Amazing.
Well, the fire problem, the stranding problem. I don't want an electric school bus in Maine or Alaska or Minnesota or South Dakota or North Dakota when you're going out to rural areas, when it's not just a 30-minute trip around an urban area, but it's an hour front to back, hauling kids from rural areas. And then all of a sudden they get stranded in a snowstorm because the battery goes off.
Mm.
Yep, thank you. All right, I've got a bit of a 1-2 punch here, a comment and then a question that I think ties to it. Bigfoot says, when I was in high school, we had a lady present in Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth slideshow to the whole school. My science teacher the next period spent the whole time debunking it. He'd get fired today. And the question that I'm tying to it is from Energy Colonizer, who says, for any students forced to profess climatism just to pass a course, how many eventually discover the truth? And I'm going to pitch that to Steve first.
Well, everybody is eventually going to discover the truth. Come 2070, I think the fear of man-made global warming is going to become high on the list of of superstitions in history. So it's all going to get there. Matter of fact, we may go into a cooling period for a few decades here. Very tough to predict global temperatures, and these periods come and go. And so we could be looking at 20 or 30 or 40 years of cooling, and then where will the climate alarmists be?
Yeah, the problem is that we've got a corrupted temperature measurement system all throughout the world, which is geared towards getting increasingly warmer because of the fact that it's biasing the low temperature upwards.
That's true too.
But I will say that we will start seeing temperatures coming down once this El Nino and the water vapor in the atmosphere from the Hunga Tonga volcano start going down. And so average global temperature will start coming down, and then they will have a little bit of a problem. But the long term is probably going to still continue to go up because urbanization is going to increase. It has been increasing, and there's no sign of it stopping.
Right. And I'll add that even if, you have nothing but teachers and media, enforcing the idea all the time that we're in a climate emergency or whatever, there's still some of us do escape from the propaganda mill. The thing that's sad about the California story is that they're making the climate part the like credit that you have to get. When I was in school, I took 3 courses to avoid having to take women's studies because they combined a bunch of credits into women's studies so that more people would take it to try and encourage that. And it seems like they figured out that that strategy and headed it off at the pass when it comes to the climate issue. All right, I've got a question here from LT Oracle of Truth, who is watching on Rumble. Thank you for watching us there as well. Question: doesn't global warming occur before an ice age, not global cooling? I'm not really sure how to take this question. Anthony?
Yes. I don't know. I can't quite get my mind around this question, but if you go back in history, paleo history, and just look at it, there's up and down cycles, and the Earth has periodically warmed and cooled. We've had snowball Earth, we've had hothouse Earth, and it's done all that without any influence from mankind whatsoever.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's see. Oh, this is one that I think we should address just because it's directed at the Heartland Institute. This says from Bob: I once saw a talk by an educator who claimed the Heartland Institute got its start by defending the tobacco industry. Is that true? Jim?
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, we get this a lot. And there's a lot of lies about the Heartland Institute that are out there on the internet. We did not get our start by defending the tobacco industry. We did defend smokers. We did present scientific studies that were done and showed that secondhand smoke and actually smoking are not the same thing. And they are. It was sold as that by people who are against smoking. And okay, fine. But if you're against smoking, then let's have real data here. And the idea that secondhand smoke and firsthand smoke are the same thing is not scientifically correct. And so, yes, we push back on that. We push back on, smokers were the least, just be honest about it. Smokers are picked on. They're overtaxed. The taxes on cigarettes go up all the time. I think a pack of cigarettes in New York City now costs something like $17, maybe even more than $20. And so, yes, in the 1980s, especially, the Heartland Institute defended smokers' rights. We had a part of our website called the Smokers Lounge, as we kind of did a little tongue in cheek and embraced the whole idea. But we did not, we have never pushed or said that smoking doesn't cause cancer. We said that secondhand smoke does not, there's no studies out there to show that secondhand smoke induces cancer at the same rate as actually smoking. And so it's in line with what the Heartland Institute has stood for now 40 years. And it's scientific integrity, it's truth. Just because you may get your way faster by saying that secondhand smoke is the same as firsthand smoke, and then you get smoking banned in bars, you get smoking banned everywhere. And I think now in the United Kingdom, actually, I've read this story last week, they want to ban smoking outside bars and stuff. So like even when the smokers go outside, they're not going to be allowed to do that either. We think that's alarmist. We think it's not scientific. And we think it's frankly discriminatory against people who are adults and choose to smoke. And so, no, we did not get our start defending the tobacco industry. We did in the early years, and I think through the 90s and even into the early 2000s, talk about, we were the only think tank in the world that would dare to defend smokers. Nobody else would do that. And so that's not something we're ashamed of or frankly run away from. It's everywhere. But the idea that we were just like swimming in big tobacco money to do this is also incorrect. It was a stance taken on principle, and I'm glad to have the chance to address it.
But it was a stance not just taken. Everyone thinks that we're always defending the science, and we are defending the science. But if you read about us and our mission, it's not to defend science; it's to defend freedom. And this was from the start defending people's freedom. Look, I don't smoke. I smoke a cigar occasionally, a pipe occasionally, but I've never smoked cigarettes. I go to bars, where I used to go to bars, and cigarette smoke would just, for me, it was awful. But I would defend the right of people to smoke in bars. You know what? Someone owns that bar. They pay taxes on that bar. They employ people in that bar. If the people that work in that bar don't want to be around smoke, don't work in the bar. If the bar owner owns the bar and wants to allow smoking, that should be his business. It's a matter of freedom. Should you ban it on the airlines? You know what? We had an airline in Dallas, based in Dallas, flying out of Love Field, that used to ban smoking. It banned smoking when all the other airlines were allowing it, and it was competing, and it was basically, through its smoking ban, getting business from other airlines. And they said, oh, we don't like this competition. So they got together and they said, oh, we've got to, you should ban smoking that way. And of course, Braniff went under, largely because they no longer had the advantage that they had through their own voluntary choice, decided not to allow smoking and created a market for their airline. So it's about freedom. It is about scientific integrity, but it's about people allowing people's choice. Yep. Even when it discomforts some of us.
Well done. Get a few more questions in here.
I kind of started something with that one, didn't I? Reading that question.
All right. No, I think
Okay.
it's no.
I think
Don't
it's
let it be
good to
said that we don't
address.
take tough questions on here or questions that
Yes.
challenge us. We do. We will.
All right. Let's go to Chris Nisbet's question. He had this question early on. He says, didn't it cool from the 50s to the 70s? Doesn't that mean that there hasn't been any surge since at least the 50s?
Well, yeah, it did. We did see some very cold periods during that time. Starting around 1954 or so forth, started going down. I remember some very cold years in the 60s and early 70s. That's where they started talking about the Ice Age. In fact, when I first got my start in television at WLFI TV in West Lafayette, Indiana, Purdue University, I did a special on the coming Ice Age in, I think it was the fall of 1978, a half-hour special on that. And, the climate people over at Purdue were part of that, And so they believed, yeah, global cooling's on the way. But as far as the surge goes, nah, it doesn't really mean anything. The overall trend, when you look at it through the whole temperature record all the way back to about 1880, is still upwards, even though there's that dip there. So it really doesn't affect the long-term trend. But the biggest thing about that surge is that people, the media, were saying, oh no, we've got the hottest day ever, the hottest year ever, and there's this big spike in temperature in 2023, and global warming's accelerating. Well, that one data point didn't do anything, statistically insignificant in the whole scheme of things.
But looking at the study in particular, they didn't go back to the 40s and 50s. So they couldn't comment on that. They went back, and what they looked at was the trend increasing since the 70s. And they found no increase in the trend, despite the fact, by the way, CO2 emissions keep going up, CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere keep going up, but there's no increasing trend of warming. So that's what that was about.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm going to take, I think, 2 more questions. We've got a few more than that, but we're already running a bit late here. Let's see. Okay. This is referring to Steve's book. This is from Doug Troyer, who is a very frequent viewer of ours. So thank you very much, Doug. And he says, where do you see that the breakdown begins? Steve?
Well, there are many, many aspects of this. And we're already seeing it in Europe. As I mentioned, we have Germany, Netherlands, England have stepped back from requiring heat pumps, a shift from gas stoves. We see the agriculture laws in Europe have also stepped back. They were saying basically, let's cull dairy herds. Let's stop using synthetic nitrogen fertilizer. That was being pushed. And the farmers started driving tractors into Paris and Netherlands and Berlin and blocked all of that. And they've stepped back from that. In the U.S. and by the way, in the U.S. and Europe, we now see a big speed bump with electric vehicles. EVs are losing share during the last year. The Hertz rental is getting rid of all their electric vehicles because they're too hard to maintain, too expensive, and even people with EVs, when they come to rent a car in another location, they don't really want to rent one because they can't charge at home and it's expensive. So we're just seeing, by the way, if you look also at green equipment company stocks, with the exception of Tesla, they've all been doing terribly. The Renix index of the top 30 industrial companies in the world has been flat now for 25 years. It's gone up and down, but at the same time, the S&P 500 has quadrupled. And we have very, very poor, these charging companies aren't making money. The other EV companies outside of Tesla, with two exceptions in China, are all losing money. Their stock prices are way down. So there's a lot of things going on to say that the net zero revolution is failing. And I think we're going to see more and more of this.
Thank you very much. Okay. All right. So here's a question from Bigfoot is the last one that we'll take here. And he says, could small-scale nuclear reactors solve growing energy demands for data centers? If not, what could? I'm fearful of consumer energy prices being driven higher unless they have their own source. And that's something that we've talked about. That's the reason why a lot of these big computer companies are starting to look into modular nuclear reactors, SMRs and stuff. But, what we've pointed out here at the Heartland Institute is at the same time as they are talking about that, they're also still pushing for electrification for consumer products and also still pushing for coal and gas and stuff to be shut down on the grid at large. So it's kind of a energy for me, but not for the idea coming from them. Guys?
Yeah, there's two big things with artificial intelligence. Two big things that are going to happen. One is they're going to be extending, and they are extending, coal and nuclear plants. They won't be shutting down coal and natural gas because we aren't going to have enough power. The second thing is energy prices are going to go higher. There's no doubt about that because of all the demand. I'm a little skeptical on small scale nuclear reactors. So far, if you add up the price of a bunch of small scale ones, they're not cheaper than the big scale ones. So we really need reactors to get those costs down.
I'm skeptical of small scale reactors, not for the reason Steve mentioned, but for this reason. What he was right about is the AI folks need to start lobbying actively to keep coal and natural gas fired plants open, because they say the main constraint on AI is energy now, not in 2030, not in 2035. The AEP 1000 reactor, the last approved design, it was approved a decade before one was ever built. It took a decade to build. After they approved the design, it took a decade because of all the regulations. And these small scale reactors, even if one gets its design approved, it doesn't mean that any of them will be functioning before 2035. And my suspicion is it will be longer. That's true for even large scale reactors. And so if AI is dependent on this stuff and it's growing, we will not have AI in the United States unless we keep existing baseload power plants on. What will happen is they'll see it. They're all pushing for it. Microsoft can say, we'll buy all the power from a restarted 3 Mile Island that it will deliver. We'll pay for all of it to get it restarted. That doesn't mean it'll be restarted next week or next year or even in 5 years. And what are they going to do in the meantime? Well, what they're going to do, if they can't keep the power on, is they'll have to move overseas. So we're offshoring another industry.
Yeah, I'm holding out for the Mr. Fusion appliance.
I mean, look, I don't think small scale reactors are that much trouble in the sense of we've had a nuclear navy since the 1950s, folks. We have aircraft carriers and submarines that operate small scale and aren't killing people and haven't killed people for 70 years now. Yep. If you wanted to build those, but that's not what they're trying to do. They've got to have whole new designs.
Well, we're already seeing power plants extended. You mentioned the 3 Mile Island plant, which was closed 2019, being restarted. They're restarting the Palisades plant in Michigan that was closed 2 years ago. They've extended the Diablo Canyon nuclear plant in California. We have 2 coal plants in Wyoming, and I believe 2 in Utah that are now being extended. They're talking about extending plants in West Virginia and Tennessee. And they're going to have to do this to get enough power. The big guys are coming with these big contracts, Microsoft and Google and others, and they're going to be extending these plants. And the green movement is going to be wailing and gnashing teeth. Why can't we shut down these coal plants? Why can't we shut down natural gas plants? It isn't going to happen.
Now, you're right. They extended one in Kansas as well for a specific factory. But the Michigan and 3 Mile Island aren't extended. Remember, they have closed. It's not a matter of extending something. No. They're talking about restarting it. They're talking about it. It has to go through the same process that it went before. And so it's not going to start next year. It's not a matter of just running the fuel into a plant it's been closed, but is still functional. No, they have to go through the regulatory process. I have no doubt that they will restart, but that's not extending the life of a plant that is currently open.
It's a mix.
All right. Well, I think that'll do it. I forgot the exit music. Goodness. Andy, our producer, usually here, is not here. There it is. There's our exit music. And yes, you're right, Mark Modesto. I did not get mad today. I get mad on the In the Tank podcast, which is done at the same time, but on Thursdays, 1 p.m. Eastern time. I think I had a couple pretty good rants yesterday. So you can go to Heartland's YouTube page, which is youtube.com/Heartland Institute, and you can see that. Yes, and that's right. Anthony's the one, or Sterling's the one who got mad today. Sometimes it's Anthony, sometimes it's Sterling, and sometimes it's me. It's never Linnea, though.
Don't get mad, get glad.
That's right. So I'd like to thank our streaming partners for this show and a lot of the shows that we're doing on here, and that would be junkscience.com, What's Up With That, CFACT, and Climate Depot. I want to thank our panel for being here today. That would be Anthony Watts, Sterling Burnett, Linnea Lucan, and our very special guest today, Steve Goreham. And you want to check out his books. He's got several books on climate and energy that you're going to want to find. So go to Amazon.com and find those for yourself. Always visit heartland.org for great information on the climate, and also climateataglance.com, climaterealism.com, whatsupwiththat.com. Oh yeah, almost forgot. energyataglance.com as well. Thank you all for being with us today, and we will talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
How dare you!